Even though it's not a great way to make a huge living, but what an awesome life. People will choose slavery over starvation.
The big deal is when the truth is told, ag wins. But whenever somebody else tells our story and lies are told, we lose.
For so long, the narrative was set by everyone else except the less than 2% of us that are left in ag. And now you guys are taking ownership of that narrative.
Not all change is progress, but all progress requires change.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Real Rule. This is an exciting episode as our first stop here on the Texas tour. But before I introduce them, we want to say a huge thank you to everybody at Empire Ag for not only sponsoring this episode, but for being the presenting sponsor on this tour. I can't wait to introduce these next guys to you. So without further ado, let's get into it. We have the honor of being here with Donnell Brown and Tucker Brown of the R.A. Brown Ranch. This is a legacy operation, not only in Texas, but in the beef industry in general. They are very, very highly respected, very successful. There's just so much to be learned, not only as producers in agriculture from these guys, but just the average Joe out there watching as well. So fellas, thank you so much for allowing us to invade your space and being on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, welcome to Throckmorton. Thanks for being here.
I've had a warm welcome, so thank you guys very much.
Absolutely.
I just want to get started here, and as we were kind of talking a little bit earlier, our show is maybe aimed a little bit more towards the just complete average Joe who doesn't really understand much about their food supply and expects their beef to be in the grocery store when they go there to get it. Over the past 50, 60 years in this country, we've not only lost half our farms and ranches, but there's been a huge disconnect between urban folks and folks who make our food. I come from a farm and ranch, and that's just been a passion of mine to try to bridge that gap. And so tell the average Joe a little bit about what you guys do, and just you explain it rather than me.
So I'm the fifth generation rancher here in north central Texas. And my wife and I and both of our boys are back with us on the ranch, and their children. We're blessed to be able to do what we do, and I'm thankful for that. Through the generations, we've always been diversified in that we've been in commercial cow-calf production for beef production, seed stock production, selling genetics, primarily bulls, as well as farming and equine. So those are the four enterprises that through all the generations back to 1895, our family has always been involved in. Now, through the generations, we've also had diversifications into other areas, some of which Tucker is doing now, because with each generation, our family challenged us to grow the business.
Love it.
To bring a new enterprise back to the business, because, you know, when we started, we were a pie this big. And if you're going to bring your family back, we've got to grow the pie. Can't just cut those pieces smaller and expect everybody to be fulfilled.
Right.
So we've grown that through the generations, and it's been an absolute blessing.
If you had to pick one as your main focus, would you say you're more seed stock focused, more commercial herd? I mean, I feel like I know the answer, but I just want to hear it from you guys.
So I'm the youngest of four kids in my generation, and seed stock has always been my passion. That's our storefront. We sell 800 bulls annually and two sales in March and October. And that's our focus, is how can we improve ranchers' profitability and sustainability through our genetics and our service. That's what we do. Our mission we created decades ago. It says that we are continually striving to improve the sustainability and the efficiency of converting God's forage. I'm talking about all that grass and forages out there that you and I and chickens and hogs cannot utilize, but use that to improve the efficiency, converting that into safe, nutritious, and great tasting beef to better feed his people. That's why our family's in the cattle business. Love what we do.
For all those listening at home, when you're a seed stock guy or gal, you're producing a genetic line of cattle that's going to go out and work for other producers. And the care and the time and the effort and the energy that goes into the studying of the genetics, how these genetics all work together, how they work together with the environments that are here and out of state as well. If you're not familiar with what seed stock is, that's a little bit of what it is. And then they also are in the commercial beef herd space, which is a huge part of their operation as well. So what do you guys see as one of the biggest challenges in your operation today, or what would be one of the things that you'd like to see a change come on the horizon that affects you or affects the beef industry as a whole?
Well, it's interesting because agriculture is a dynamic business. I'm thankful that our country, since its inception, has had a cheap food policy, a safe, cheap food policy. I really appreciate that because I believe our founding fathers developed that with the focus of making sure that we have national security, for one. Because if we can feed our people, then we're not dependent on others for survival. I'm all about energy independence and food independence. I think those are two critical issues of national security. And in today's world, where such a small percentage is in the food production business, so many of the masses really don't understand where their food comes from and what all is required to do it. So I guess one of my biggest concerns is, will our country continue to maintain a cheap food policy? Because we have to remember, a commodity business, right? So many of our agricultural products are commodities, which by definition is a break-even business.
Right.
Right? They're low margin.
On a good year sometimes.
they're low margin, they're high risk, and high cost of income. So with that, how can we help producers access capital? How can we help them manage risk? Because so many things are outside of our control, like markets, like weather. And so, those are in a high volatility, low margin, high capital intensive business. Thank goodness it's a wonderful lifestyle. Right?
Yes.
Because people, we love what we do. Even though it's not a great way to make a huge living, but what an awesome life. And what a wonderful way to raise your children and now grandchildren in an environment where, as my wife loves to say, where we can learn so much about birth, growth, maturity, and even death in such a variety of ways. And how all of those experiences help us be better humans, help us be better citizens of our communities. I'm such a fan of rural America.
You touched on something a minute ago regarding our food supply and how it relates to our national security and really our national sovereignty. There is an effort by some in this country that would prefer to see our food production outsourced, the way that our manufacturing has been outsourced. How did that work for our country? Well, not so well. But you guys explain to the American people, what would that do to us as a country if our food supply and creation of food was outsourced to other countries?
We would lose all the power that we had. Or if we are asking someone else to produce our food and then fully rely on them, and then at one moment, whether they make a trade deal with another country and they say, well, for us to work together, you have to say no to the U.S., then we are on our hands and knees begging for someone to help us. So huge on national security because, food and power, we have to be able to produce ourselves, or we'll be very dependent on someone else, and our defenses will be down.
Here, I like to look at it like, being a native Texan, the Battle of the Alamo.
Okay.
I know not everyone knows that story, but in the battle for Texas independence from the country of Mexico, in San Antonio, Texas, at a fort, at a mission, a rock building similar to this rock we've got right here, all right? It was a fortress. It was a stronghold. But there was a small group of Texans that were fighting against thousands in the Mexican army. And there were way more in the Mexican army that lost their life in that battle. But the percentage of the Texans was almost 100%. So we lost the Battle of the Alamo. Now, my question is, could Mexico have won the Battle of the Alamo without ever firing a shot? Had they just waited until they ran out of food people will choose slavery over starvation. That's why I believe it is so critical for us to maintain our food independence. And the U.S. is, compared to so many countries around the world, it is so focused on not only food security, but also food safety.
Amen.
Make sure that it is safe to feed our families. And that is a critical part of the industry we're in today, and I'm thankful for it, because I don't want to have all the foodborne illnesses that are in third world countries, or that our ancestors years ago, prior to technology to help prevent that, was available.
Absolutely. In America, as beef producers, we do raise the safest product, the highest quality product, and really other countries can do it cheaper in some ways, which that is the scary thing, because they don't have the high input costs we have. They don't have the regulations that we have, and that we as ranchers, I think we're all on the same team, that we all want to do everything in our power to make sure that our product is the highest quality and is the safest.
The Texas Tour series of the Real Rural podcast is sponsored by Empire Ag, the partner that covers the whole operation. They combine consulting, financial services, and branding to help producers tighten up their business and tell their story well. Visit youragempire.com to see how they can support your operation.
There's a lot of people moving to rural America since COVID from the urban areas, and we're glad that they're seeking a different way of life, but they may still not have a clue that you guys are out there raising some of the best beef in the world. Explain to them the difference between American beef and beef that is not American but gets imported into the country, and if you have any thoughts on that.
My first initial thought is that when I kind of like this movement, a lot of the ag, this movement of people wanting to know where their food comes from, or that is challenging the safety of our food. I think that's a good thing in the long run. Ag at the moment kind of feels like we're on our defense and we're trying to defend ourselves, but when the truth is told, U.S. ag wins. And so I'm not afraid of them coming and asking questions and trying to peek through the door and open the gate and come in, and I'm just standing there with the gate open saying to it, let's go look. I think you'll like what you see. The big deal is when the truth is told, ag wins. But whenever somebody else tells our story and lies are told, we lose. And that's been happening, and we know that's been happening from our side of the coin. But like more people moving out to rural communities, I think is a great thing, because there's no other way to get to know it rather than to be in it or around it or involved in it or to know the people in it. Right. Just like this platform you're building is doing, of sharing what it is. And so whenever we get these regulations put on us by governments that we've seen other countries do, and in our head we're like, oh, we'll never do that here. But if the people voting who are 98% not working in food production, if they don't know, right, then why should we expect them to not vote for those regulations? Amen. And so it's
And you're talking about what kind of regulations, Tucker? For example?
For example, I think we can look at something like GMOs and the fear that's been produced around GMOs in our country. Mm-hmm. When the EU will not allow their farmers to grow GMOs, but because they are short on product, they will buy GMO product from Brazil, and they will replace that. Gotcha. Their people don't know, yep, but their farmers are taking a hit, right, because they can't grow more of that product. And so whenever lies are told, and fear is scary, the fear of the unknown, and
sure.
And so, but when the truth is told, ag wins, and in specifically, U.S. ag wins.
You obviously are an amazing advocate for agriculture. You've built a huge following online. Where did your desire to do that start? Where did that come from for you to want to do that?
Well, thank you for the kind words, first of all. Thank you. I mean, it's in my bloodline. Both my parents being national FFA presidents, that's in my blood, of representing the industry, representing our people, and having our voice heard, and finding the truth at the same time, and then sharing that. I grew up traveling with them going to speak to different associations, different chapters, different stadiums full of people. And now, I didn't exactly do it whenever I was like 22 or 25 or whenever they did. But now that I'm getting into my 30s and my kids are growing up, and I went to a college that was not an agriculture college. And so I was surrounded by people for the very first time, leaving Throckmorton, wow, full of ag. I leave Throckmorton, I go to Lubbock. Lubbock Christian University is where I went. where I thought everybody would knew cows, plows, and sows, and it turns out we did not. And we might have known the cows part, but I was surrounded by people who didn't have that same connection or the same appreciation for land and livestock. And so as I went through my 4 years there, I loved the people, I loved my time, but I also saw what are 98% of people outside of ag think, see, what questions they have. And so as I came home, I remember that's when I decided that I was really wanting to come home, was whenever I thought of my family. And I was like, man, not that my kids would be raised bad if they weren't in ag, but ag just gives this opportunity for them to have that same appreciation, the same character building opportunities that ag provides. So that's what brought me home. And then as I had people, my college classmates, asking me questions, very simple questions of like, well, why do you saddle that way? Why do you saddle your horse that way? Or how do you prevent it from bucking you off? Or what does that's not a bull, it doesn't have horns. And so simple, very simple questions of what I see as very mundane and day to day, and everybody knows that, right? Well, that's not the case. And so I've been able to use social media as a way for me to just simply show what I'm doing, using some humor to attract people who may not watch it otherwise, and mostly that's for me, so I can have fun, really. It's selfishly is what it's for. But I can share in a way that people are willing to watch, and sometimes people aren't necessarily going to the internet to find out beef facts.
Right.
Well, how can I make it fun to watch, and how can I put the truth about beef in that? And that's where I really have fun. But the main thing is that I am ranching every day. That's the main thing, is that I'm still grounded. I don't want to leave the ranch and move to LA and be an influencer. I want to do what I'm doing. I've been able to blend my passions of ranching, of beef, with the storytelling, social media side.
Absolutely. For so long, the narrative was set by everyone else except the less than 2% of us that are left actually in ag. And now you guys are taking ownership of that narrative, and you're one of the first, in my opinion, that really is telling the story and taking control of the narrative again. And I feel like this movement is just building even more so. But what is one of the biggest lies that you guys see? I think every producer kind of has a little different lie. One of them is the GMO stuff that we were talking about. Let the audience hear from real producers like yourselves. What is another lie that you guys have heard, maybe your whole lives or maybe recently, and you're just like, man, it's just not like that, if you have an example of one?
Absolutely. And may I follow up just a little bit on his social media stuff? And that is, I've heard it said that a picture's worth 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. And a short video is worth 1,000 pictures.
Amen.
But a good example is worth thousands of videos. But what Tucker is doing is just what you're doing. You're opening your listener audience, your watching audience, to the big metropolis of Throckmorton, Texas, population 707. And Tucker is doing that, opening it up to R.A. Brown Ranch, to the ranching, cattle production, food production industry, in a way that says, come see what we do.
Amen.
Come walk with me for a day, and let me show you how much we love the land, how much we love the animals, and the endless hours that we invest to take care of all of God's creation that we believe He put us here to be caretakers of, and to provide food for an ever-growing global population.
Yeah.
So we see it as a calling, and I'm just really thankful for what Tucker's doing, because you're right. What you're doing, what Tucker's doing are great things to help share the message for people to see the truth and the facts. To me, one of the biggest misconceptions or lies out there is cattle's impact on the environment.
Amen. I was hoping we were going to get to that. I knew we were.
Yes, absolutely. So cattle are upcyclers. They convert low-quality forages, grasses and forbs and things that you and I and chickens and hogs cannot utilize nutritionally, and they convert that into some of the highest quality beef that's loaded with zinc, iron, and protein. Things that our bodies need that are part of a very healthy diet And so cattle are able to take that non-cultivatable land because it's either too steep and highly erodible, or it's too rocky, or it's too rough, or it's too, whatever reason that it can't grow crops on it, that we can let God's grass grow and let cows convert that into high quality beef. So that's to me is the mistruth is that do cattle produce methane? They do produce a little bit, right? You and I do too. The question is, let's look at the give and take. Okay, what is the good relative to the offset? And so I think it's important for people to know that cattle are such a tiny part of greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's important to have those, to have our food supply, to have that nutrient-rich diet with beef in that diet.
Amen.
So we started a company here a few years ago called Ranchers Sustainable Angus Beef. And just starting to market that product, bring cattle through that system as a supply chain for the industry, for our customers that use our genetics. We're feed efficiency testing all of our cattle. We get individual feed intake on over 1,000 animals every year. And with that, we're able to get the more efficient animals that do more with less. To me, that is a great definition of sustainability. How can we do more with less? Because as we look at global population, it is continuing to grow, especially in third world countries, all right? And yet as it grows, and even in some of these countries that are stable on population, there's more and more land, as you mentioned earlier in the program, that's moving out of agriculture production and being used for lifestyle. Right? We're going to put a business on it, or we're going to do something besides produce food on it.
Right.
And so we've got to produce more with less.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is sell steaks with a story. To sell steaks, there's 9 of us as seed stock producers around the country with all of our customers. Our customers produce over 200,000 head of feeder calves a year. We're trying to provide them an avenue to get their product with their story from the ranch to the retailer to the consumer.
Amen.
Where that consumer can see a video of a family in Two Buttes, Colorado. But yeah, I think we've got to tell that story that cattle are upcyclers that are actually helping make things better.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I have a dear friend in Nashville, and she came to me one time and she goes, I watched this show on Netflix. And I was like, oh boy, can't wait to see where this goes. And she was like, but they just say that cattle are going to destroy the planet. And I was like, oh no, 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 no. And so I wish that I'd had this podcast at that moment. Sure. You just mentioned too that the ranchers have had to produce more with less. You know, we have this squeeze on our land production. We have the squeeze on our market side. And then we have this conversation happening in ag right now that our herd size is the least it's ever been, and that is true. But tell the American people how through ingenuity and pressure and want to, that we have demanded more of ourselves and more of our operations, and we've become way more efficient than we ever have been, to where our cattle are producing more pounds per head. Tell them a little bit about that.
Yeah, I heard my dad say all while I was growing up that you don't have to change, but you do have to compete with those who do. And so the ranchers who have made it, there have been a lot of tough times for ranchers, more in my dad's lifetime than mine, obviously. But there have been some really tough times, and those that have made it have tended to be the ones that have been willing to change. And whether that is change slightly or change a lot in some cases. And so ranching is a business. As much as we love the lifestyle, we have to treat it like a business. If we plan to keep the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch, we have to treat it like a business and make decisions that way too. And I'm so thankful for my grandmother, Peggy. She said that growing up too, of all the decisions that we make are through those binoculars of, will this help us keep the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch? And it kind of helps take the emotion out of some of that, and it's like, here's the facts. Will this help us or will it not? Yeah. So technology has been huge, especially in the seed stock business, to where we can find out where we're using DNA samples to find all kinds of ways to improve cattle faster. And was it in the 80s that EPDs came around.
Yeah, early 80s.
And there's plenty of charts on growth, on milk, on marbling, that once we started to measure it, the manageability of that skyrocketed.
Mega progress.
Yeah, and so now that we've been able to measure those things with technology, we've been able to make really fast changes in making cattle that either eat the same and gain way more, and some even eat less and still gain more. Or some need less time on feed to get to the weight that we need and have that marbling that the American people love and that other countries love, that makes American beef so good. And so that technology is a good thing, and it's a tool. And on the ranch, I think we find ourselves at our best whenever we do blend technology and tradition together. And it hurts my heart whenever I see other ranches allow tradition to suppress their success and even shut down their business, close their ranch, lose the family farm. And that's heartbreaking. But whenever we're able to use technology as a tool, not just as the only thing to keep us going, but as a blend of technology and tradition, is when we find ourselves at our best. And so that has been the case for many ranches, many farms. And some of them don't, and that's okay. And some of them are still making it that way. But I just want to be, I want to be the one that, as the sixth generation of this ranch, keeping that thing in my mind that my grandmother said of, well, let's do things to keep the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch. And that is the blend of technology and tradition that helps us get there.
And Tucker, you know the fact of how much we're producing more beef for the same amount of beef as we had with way more cows back in the 70s. And I'm thankful that we have the tools and the technology to do it. I remember Tucker coming home from a conference one time, and I said, what'd you learn? He said, well, there was a great speaker, and he challenged us, he said, are we still doing things the way Granddad did? And I thought about that a lot. And I don't even know who that speaker was, but he created a thought in our minds to really think about, okay, are we still doing what Granddad did? So I never got to know either one of my grandfathers because they passed before I was born. Thankfully, Tucker's granddad, he was able to enjoy his granddaddy Brown until earlier this month when he went to heaven.
Yes.
But, here he is 30, how many years old now? Yeah. So, but when I think about my grandfather was one of the original founders of the American Quarter Horse Association.
Yes.
He was one of the first people to bring Hereford cattle to this part of the country. And so when I think about it, I think as we answer that question, are we still doing things the way Granddad did? To me, the question is it literally or figurative? Because I believe my granddad did all he could with what he had while he was here.
Right.
Now, if literally we're still doing everything the way Granddad did, I mean, he was skinning cows in the 1920s as a teenager to trade on a buckboard to go 65 miles to Abilene and trade it for cows to keep the rest of the herd along.
Yeah.
To trade it for feed, trade hides for feed to keep the rest of the herd along. So, am I still doing that? No, I'm still bartering what we have for something more, but in a much more advanced way.
Right.
And that's where I think we've got to be willing to change. Because not all change is progress, but all progress requires change. So we've got to keep those things. And I want to come back to rural America for just a minute. So I think one of the big challenges we face is very current and real and as of late in our generation, threat, and that's the screwworm.
Yeah.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Screwworms have been identified with just 70 miles south of our U.S. border, south of South Texas. I remember as a youngster screwworms in this area. And those can be devastating. For those that don't know, a screwworm is a fly that lays an egg. It grows into a maggot like any other fly, but different. Because the maggot of a screwworm fly eats living flesh.
Right.
Where most other flies, blowflies, they help biodegrade decaying dead flesh. These eat living flesh, so they can actually eat animals alive.
Right.
Including humans.
Exactly.
So that's a scary deal. So different than the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, we have more tools and technology than we can use today that my granddad didn't have in the 1950s and 60s.
Right.
So we're going to use that technology to use all we have while we're here with, to accomplish what we need to accomplish. To keep the ranch in the family and the ranch to stay sustainable. So we got to work, and I'm so proud of Brooke Rollins, our Secretary of Agriculture, doing an awesome job, and thankful that she has a great relationship with President Trump. Well, we've got to push, and as a group of agriculturalists, we've got to push to make sure we get the solution to the screwworm fly is sterile fly production, which is amazing that they figured out in the 60s how they can use radiation to treat flies and not kill them, but sterilize them. And the female screwworm only makes one time.
Right.
If she mates to a sterile fly, she has unfertilized eggs, and it breaks the life cycle, and that group of flies dies out. Boy, we have to have those. And right now, 5 years ago, the closest flies were 2,500 miles away from the Texas border.
Right.
All right. At last note, they were 70 miles from the Texas border. All right. Since COVID, that was part of it, where internationally there was less watching for and able to do what we do outside with fly production, the factories that produce those sterile flies, and just all the things that have happened, plus the human migration that came so much through the Biden administration.
Oh, yes, and the Darien Gap.
Yes, all through that. They were part of that spread of those screwworms through closer to the north, closer to us.
Right.
So anyway, that's why I'm so for our agricultural organizations, whether it's National Cattlemen's Beef Association or Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers or Colorado Cattlemen's Association, all these organizations, let's work together because we're stronger together to be a voice, to communicate to our leaders, to develop policy for the best interest of the human population in America.
Well, and just a side note to anyone out there listening, I mean, you're hearing two ranchers speak about the importance of wildlife. And in Colorado, there is this effort that a lot of these folks, environmentalist extremists, really, that's just what it is. They want to get rid of the rancher because they think that cattle are bad and the ranchers are bad and the ranchers don't care about anybody. But when you cut through all the media lens and you cut through all the middleman, you're listening to two guys that have really nothing to gain, or if so, little, by wanting to defend the wildlife population of the entire area that they're in. And yet it's a rancher that wants to do that because it's in our bones, it's in our heart to take care of everything that is on the land, that is in and on the land and dwells within it. So guys, I just appreciate your time so very much. And if I could, just as we're kind of wrapping this, I think it's important to hear, and part of why we wanted to start this podcast is because agriculture is this very complex, complicated, one hand has to hold the other in many cases to keep it all moving. And no one solution is necessarily the fix. But I feel like it's important for the American people and people in power to hear straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. But is there anything else that is kind of top of mind that you see on your daily life that's like, man, we should fix this, we need to fix this, and here's a way we could fix X, Y, or Z problem in ag?
I'm going to say one of the unique things about agriculture is we look at these small family farms, and the small family farm 100 years ago is different than a small family farm today. And I want to share a few of those differences why. Because land availability is a challenge, and the affordability is even a bigger challenge.
Oh, yeah.
So what's interesting is, as we look at it, cattle production in the United States, in all reality, for the most part, is a byproduct of land ownership. Many people who create wealth, inherit wealth or something, they are taking that and buying land as an investment because land values tend to escalate over time. They're a very safe investment, and we can enjoy the creation. We can enjoy the wildlife. We can enjoy the stars at night and all of the wonders of living in the country. But there's so many people that are own farms and ranches, and more ranches than farms, because we can be less involved managerially on a daily basis in a ranch than we can in a farm. And so there are a lot of people that have W-2 jobs that are not food production but own land and are in the ranching community. I think we need those people that are professionals in things other than agriculture. That's where their involvement in our organizations are so important, because they're the ones that are, around their job, around the water cooler, can communicate with other people that may not be in food production and it may not be in ranching. And we need all of those people, even though the average, farmer ranch cow herd size is in the 30s in Texas and
Right.
not much bigger or smaller in other states. There are a lot of them that are small that inherited a piece of land or bought a piece of land as a way to store and wealth. And so I don't see that as a downside or a good side. I see it as a reality. And we just need to get all those people all singing from the same sheet of music of let's protect individual property owner rights. Let's maintain a cheap food policy. I'm just thankful that those people want to own land, even though it makes it harder for us to be able to buy land and pay for it with agriculture. And that's why you come to Throckmorton today, and now, there's wind turbines just across the county line. There's solar panels going in. But when we were trying to decide, are we gonna lease our land for that alternative energy purpose and see these big windmills that are foreign to our horizon? And that was an emotional battle for all of us.
Sure.
But I remember the words of my dad ringing in my ears. At that point in time, our community had decreased by 40% in population since I'd graduated from high school.
It's reality with a lot of rural America.
It is. And so we want to use all the natural resources we have. So today, we're sitting half a mile from one of the newest state-of-the-art schools in the country because we had 3 wind farms developed in this community or in this county that have brought great finances into this
Right.
community. We are the smallest populated county in the state of Texas that still has a county hospital. And the way
Wow.
we're able to keep that infrastructure is by saying, all right, what can we do to utilize the land to draw more people and more income to our community, to keep it a vibrant and living community? I remember a guy saying when people were fighting the railroads years ago, we'll never have those dang stinking smoke coffin darn cranes in our area. Well, those are the communities that then not too long after the railroad era had grass growing up in the sidewalks. In the 1950s, when oil production was big in this part of the world, there were people who said, no, don't want to have any part to do with that. But those are natural evolutions of what can I do with what we have while we're here to produce what is a blessing to our families, to our community, and our country.
Kind of like what your grandpa did. What can I do with what I got to get what I need to get done? That's it. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. So. Well, guys, thank you so very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time and letting us use this incredible studio space. It's just been a joy. So we just want to say thank you, and thanks for all you're doing in agriculture to keep it going.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. It takes more than just one voice, so I'm glad that we at least got 3 in the room. They're telling that story.
And thanks for what you're doing. And
Yeah.
thanks for
Yeah.
using the God-given gifts that God blessed you with to touch people's lives. So thank you.
Well, thanks. It does take an army. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us on this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one. Adios.
If you don't already follow us on social media, please do. We're on Instagram and YouTube at The Real Rule. Please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Give us a thumbs up or a heart or a like. It really helps. If you want to get the merch, go to clairedunn.com. Click on store. Once you get there, you can get a Support Ag t-shirt. And thank you guys for all your love and support.